Hello, and welcome to a spectacular... Hang on. Sorry. Welcome to a spectacular Halloween episode of the Shutter School. I am your host, Dustin Thompson, and on tonight's episode, I want to teach you how to take terrifying ghost photos. So without further ado, let's get started. There are several different ways that you can do ghost photos, and I'm going to cover a few of my favorites. First, we're going to light paint in our ghost. Second, it's going to be pretty similar, except we're going to be using flash. Third, we're going to be using natural light and blocking our lens. And fourth, we're going to be using our good old friend Photoshop. One thing that I love about the flashlights is I can decide how much or how little of my scene is lit. And I can also add a little bit of extra light around my subject to give them that really eerie glow. To set up my shot, I will put my camera on a tripod. Sometimes I will also take a little LED and put it just out of frame so my subject knows where to go to get out of the shot in the dark. You definitely don't want your subject wandering around in the dark and hurting themselves. But make sure that the LED doesn't show up in your photo unless you want it to. I'm also going to focus on my subject and set the camera to manual focus because we will not be able to focus on her in the dark. Once we have everything set up, we're going to turn out all the lights. Sometimes if you're using a really stopped down aperture, you can get away with having a light on in another room. But be sure to take some test shots and make sure that the photo is coming out completely black. Now comes the tricky part. You need to figure out how long of an exposure you're going to use. Because obviously the longer your exposure, the more time you will have to paint in your subject with a flashlight, but also that will allow the ambient light to creep in if any is present. When it comes to light painting, it's all about how slow you make the passes over your subject and how many passes you make over them. Also, I like to keep my ISO nice and low. This keeps my shot clean and free of noise. But that's just a preference. Maybe you'll want a high ISO that'll add grain to your photo and give it more of a vintage feel. One more fun thing that you can do is use gels, or as in this case, plastic cup lids. I can use this to paint my subject with a blue light, and then when she steps out of the frame, I'll paint the background in with regular colored light. This will add separation and make her look a little more interesting. Now that we have the shot all set up, I'll take one with the lights on just so you can see what I'm doing. As I said before, I will focus on V, set the camera to manual focus, and then I will usually turn the light off at this point, but for the sake of demonstration, I will begin my exposure, which I have set for 20 seconds. Then I will take my flashlight and I will paint V into the scene. Ever so carefully. You can always stop at the ankles so she fades out at the bottom. Then I will have V head to the LED light and I will paint in my scene. And that's how it's done. The second method is very similar to the first, except for this time we're going to be using a camera flash, or possibly two instead of a flashlight. The main difference is that the flash will light up a whole lot more of our scene unless we're using a snoot or another type of modifier. The other difference is now we can do cool things like freezing motion. The challenge with flash is that it can be a lot more powerful than a flashlight, so we need to do a test shot and make sure that 2 blasts from the flash will not overexpose our photo. With the lights on, the shot would look like this. I will focus on V as always, set the camera to manual focus. This is where you usually turn out the lights, but I am going to begin my exposure. Alright, ready V? 3, 2, 1. Hit her with the flash with the snoot on. Then I will have her head to the LED. And then I will light the rest of my scene with the bare flash. The next setup that we're going to cover is a natural light ghost shot. This one is fun and fast. What we're going to need to do is drop our ISO all the way down, and we're going to need to stop our aperture all the way down as well. This will hopefully allow us to use a shutter speed between 10 to 20 seconds. If your photos are still coming out overexposed, you may need a neutral density filter. And we're going to need a black card as well, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. This time we don't need to set the camera to manual focus because we are shooting in the daylight, but it might be a good idea to set the timer since it is a long exposure photo. What I'm going to do is start my exposure with V in the frame, which I have set for about 20 seconds. After about 15 seconds, I'm going to take the black card and cover the lens, have V step out of the frame, and then uncover the lens so it gets to see the bare scene without her in it. And our last method is using Photoshop. I think that the other styles are a lot more fun, but if you're confident in your Photoshop skills, I'm sure you can yield some amazing results this way. Just like with all other ghost photos, a tripod is a must. If you have a remote shutter release, it's great too. It's not a must, but it will reduce the chance of your composition being tilted by pressing the shutter release. Luckily on my Sony a7 II, I can release the shutter from my phone via the Play Memories app. It is extremely important that the photos line up. This will save you so much trouble in post-processing. This one's pretty simple. All we do is set the camera for the proper exposure, set it to manual focus so it doesn't refocus in between shots. Then we take one shot with our subject in the scene and one shot of just the bare scene. Now that we have the photos, let's throw it over to Photoshop to complete the effect. Now that we have our files, let's take them and throw them into our good old friend here, Photoshop. As you can see, it takes a little bit to open. There's my background layer, and there is the photo with V in it. Let's stretch this window out so you can see just a little bit better. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my background image, I'm going to press Command A to select all, Command C to copy, and then I'm going to go to the photo of V, I'm going to press Command V to paste. As you can see, both layers are here. Now on the right, I'm going to drop the opacity down. You see if I drop it down all the way, you can see her. So let's raise it up just a little bit so you can just barely see her. That'll show us where to paint. Now we are going to create a layer mask. Click inside the layer mask. Choose the brush tool. And make sure that we are set to black. And last, I'm going to change my brush opacity. I'm going with 45% here. But if you want a more faint ghost, go lower. If you want a ghost that's much more solid looking, you can go higher. This is where it's up to you. And I'm just going to paint V into the scene here. This is really similar to the levitation video, if you've seen that one that I did. We're going to paint her in all the way. If you want to check where you've painted, you can use the backslash key. Give you a little red outline. And now I will switch my color to white to refine my edges just a little bit. Since it's pretty much the same scene, you don't have to be too picky about refining your edges because you're not pasting it into a totally different background. So there you have it. There is V the ghost. And the last thing you want to do is you want to come over and you want to click down on your background layer while holding down Control, and this will bring you the option to flatten your image, which will combine the two. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Shutter School. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to see how your ghost photos came out. You can either share the link down below or at my Facebook page, facebook.com/Dustin Thompson Photography. Be sure you subscribe to the Shutter School. I have lots of cool stuff coming up. Have a very happy and safe Halloween. And until next time, I'm Dustin and she's V. We'll see you soon. Cheers.